Hi, everyone. Rose Webster here. I just want to set the record straight about a few things that are buzzing around out there in the scientific and medical community, especially in the United States. What you don't know is that I've been alerting even politicians and medical people and scientific people in Canada since 2016 about my concerns about Wolbachia-infected Aedes releases. And daily there's an onslaught of people who deride me and insult me and make fun of me and so on. So I just wanted to clear up some rumors that seem to be going out there, and I don't want to identify this person because it's somebody I am trying to help. And I'm blocked from a page that's devoted to people with uveal melanoma, so I was kind of asking why. And this person told me it was my approach seems aggressive and defensive, and there's a person helping them do research, and he recoiled a bit from the tone of your post, etc. Well, there's things you don't know. There's efforts I've made that are unseen and unheard, and it's gotten back to me that I'm some kind of rude person. So uh, I just I just want to be sure everybody knows what transpired and the time frame involved, because time is of the essence when people are going to have an eyeball removed. And as you know, half of people with uveal melanoma, well, they die of usually liver metastases. So this is life and death. So there's a certain urgency about my correspondence. So I want to go through it so that you know exactly what transpired, because you may be only hearing one side of it. So we're talking January 5th that I first wrote to Dr. Brennan. I found out about him from a Daily Mail post, and I said I'd like to offer up a possible environmental reason, Wolbachia. Notably, one of the young women, Keenan Cole, was one of the first diagnosed with ocular melanoma in the area in 2009. And it was in 2009 the first Wolbachia-infected Aedes experiments were conducted by the U.S. government. Now, since that time, I should add this. I have learned that experimentation has been going on since the 60s, and that's in my latest paper on InfoBarrel. And I said straight up, I'm not an ophthalmologist, but I work for some world-class ones in Canada. I attended all the CMEs I could, and it's been actually about 2 years I've been researching the Zika virus. My educational background includes nursing and orthotics prosthetics as well. Now, the last decade or so, I've been in the writing field and researching things for Environment 911 and Palm Main and Fin, and on InfoBarrel, everything has to be reference based. So it's similar in many ways to writing for a journal, an academic journal, or something you would do in university. So I quoted notable study quotes here that you can read through. I don't want to, I know people can read faster than I can speak. And of course, you can always pause and slow down the page. So this was my first effort, January 5th, 2018. Now then, he got back to me 3 days later, and he said the Daily Mail has inaccuracies, but the reporter was certainly genuine. Happy to discuss Wolbachia. How do I speak with you? Now, ever since I've uncovered this Wolbachia thing, people have been trying to get my address and my smartphone number, which I don't have a smartphone, actually. And I know better. My best friend's in law enforcement, and I know better than to give out my address or phone number to anyone that I don't know, especially since this is a very, very heated issue right now that affects potentially millions of people, and also billions of dollars that are invested in certain things. So there are really good reasons besides my TMJ pain, which I do suffer, and I just try to force myself through it. So I had said, thank you for responding. I suffer considerable TMJ pain, so I prefer to correspond via email. And I didn't know he was the former AAO 2009 Academy president. I didn't know that. I had only looked up his address, and Helio gave it to me on an article. So I thought, wow, I should address the inaccuracies about river blindness on their site. And I did look up the two authors of that post, and I could never find an email for them. So I addressed that on January 9th. And more things about that here. I'll let you read through it because it's much quicker for you to where you need to. And as you can see, I'm citing people with PhDs and lead scientists. It's not people with their bachelors and so on. These are, I'm quoting every source. And that was the end of that. And then I had screenshots to support some things too. That was January 9th. Okay, by January 15th, I still had not heard from him. So I sent this email, but he never responded until after I sent him a screenshot of a nurse's comment. And you'll see that. This was January 15th. And my urgency is simply this. Time is of the essence. These clusters are going to keep coming. And so I joined a group. It was very strange. I got into a group, and this woman, Elizabeth Olmsted McBride, seemed to hone in, I guess, on my Achilles heel, which is that even though I as a pastime, read studies all the time, I've just always had to work since I was 16. So I haven't been a person that had a chance to do a big academic background with university and so on. I've had to work and go to school and work and go to school and feed a family. So it's, I've had a lot, to work 2-3 jobs at a time to keep things going along. So she right away honed in on what are your science credentials. And I told her my background: nursing, orthotics, prosthetics, ophthalmology, assistant technician, frontline SARS worker. And then I gave her some pertinent links so she could look up for herself. She said, "Thank you. Your background in nursing, are you an RN? Have you done in-depth research in a lab rather than just reviewing literature? Your work in ophthalmology was a technician, correct? What was entailed in your work with SARS? I have some interest in this as my son was very ill with dengue fever when he lived in Colombia." And I thought, okay, here we go. So I told her I worked in 4 Ontario, Canada hospitals for ophthalmologists at Sunnybrook, St. Mike's, Oakville, Trafalgar, McMaster University Hospital. And the researchers I'm most in touch with are Dr. Fiona Hunter, Constancia Ayers. Those are lead research scientists, but there's a few others I've been in contact with. I said I quote them in their research in many of my papers. You can view the abstracts here. So I sent her that. And I also sent her quotes by people with PhDs that have similar concerns to mine, so that it's not like I'm coming up with this out of thin air. So she continued on, "I'm just curious because research is generally carried out by those with PhD in fields like biochemistry, epidemiology, microbiology. Many researchers even have both an MD and a PhD. Any of us can do a survey of the literature, but that isn't doing research." And I had to laugh. Oh my God. Well, what happens in the lab often doesn't pan out in the natural environment. I also participated in many ophthalmology studies at Sunnybrook and at St. Mike's. I'm familiar with study protocols. And I continued on. Here's the thing with SARS. I was a frontline worker redeployed from the ophthalmology clinic. I was a straight A nursing student, so the admittance knew I could take vitals. Studies I worked on were for a retinal specialist and for a glaucoma specialist. I've not researched dengue enough to advise you, but Zika is more related to encephalitis viruses than dengue and yellow fever, even though the CDC and WHO keep lumping them together. And, this went on. And I finally said, fair enough. You don't need to read or look at any of my work. I'm not offended in the least. And I added, MDs and PhDs can be wrong, just so you know. And then she chimed in with, well, actually, I have looked at it. You mentioned the Huntersville cluster, and you have been in touch with Dr. Brennan, one of the investigators. He has apparently not felt there is enough evidence to investigate this further. And yes, MDs and PhDs can be wrong, but they have the necessary education and skills to do the research. Now, If you look up almost every research facility related to this, they're all funded by the same people funding Wolbachia-infected Aedes releases. Okay, the NIH, CDC, you said, you, Bill and Melinda Gates. I'd almost say that the entire scientific community in the US is owned by them. And so they have gag clauses. I'm very familiar with this. And anybody who goes outside this realm is very much risking themselves, their income, their career, even their livelihood. So I had to close up with her. So I guess you were sort of speaking for Dr. Brennan. Thanks. I'll be sure to add that to my next petition update. And I added, if the pathologists in Canada discover I'm right, you might regret trying to deride me. An ethical nurse would know enough to look at all possibilities. You have one profession. I've had several. Good luck to you. And I genuinely mean this. If I didn't have like 4 things I've studied in my background, not just one, I would never have gotten to this point. And I mean that sincerely. So I thought, this is crazy. So the next day, I thought, okay, I'll write to Dr. Brennan. He hasn't got back to me since January 9th. This is January 23. How professional of you to have a nurse relay your message. See screenshot. I suppose I was temporarily accepted into that group so she would spend hours, and I'm not kidding you, it was hours deriding me because I am not an MD and do not hold a PhD. I had no idea that MDs and those with PhDs were always right. Gee, when I worked in ophthalmology, there were a couple of times that a general ophthalmologist like yourself missed something that I caught. So here's what makes no sense. It's a simple blood test. I'm not asking you to dig up soil samples from some nuclear waste site. A simple blood test, a broad-range PCR screen for infection by Rickettsia. We are beyond fortunate that Chen, Dong et al. 2015 published their findings. And there again is the link. But if you would rather remove the eyes of people in their 20s and 30s, then go ahead. Eventually, other ocular oncologists and ophthalmologists will test for this, and your patients will have legal recourse since biopsy samples must be kept for at least 5 years. Shame on you. R. Webster. P.S. I will continue to petition for this and let as many people know around the world. Money means nothing to me. I can't be bought. Enjoy your 100,000. I'm copying many people on this email. I have no regrets about that. I don't think that's rude at all, considering all the deriding I get. Now, this was strange. The very next day, he gets right back to me. But, since I had emailed him before, he didn't bother getting back because he didn't want to put anything in writing. So he gets back to me the next day. Unless I'm really aging fast, have no knowledge of Elizabeth. Cross me off your mailing list, please. Well, he sure couldn't wait to write, cross me off your mailing list, but ignored 3 previous extremely polite emails. Seems he doesn't care much for these patients. Thanks for listening.